Okay, and welcome back to another video. Okay, this is the video of the last chapter of the atomic habit the Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill book की लास्ट चैप्टर है. इस बुक थोड़ी लंबी होने वाली है लास्ट चैप्टर क्योंकि भाई बहुत ज़्यादा दिया है कंटेंट. तो विदाउट एनी वेस्टिंग एनी टाइम स्टार्ट करते हैं. फर्स्ट दिया है कि उसका चैप्टर का नाम है कि हाउ टू आउट विट the six ghosts of fear. Take inventory of yourself as you read this closing chapter and find out how many of the ghosts are standing in your way. Before you can put any portion of this philosophy into successful use, your mind must be prepared to receive it. The preparation is not difficult. It begins with study, analysis, and understanding of the three enemies which you shall have to clear out. First is decision, and second is doubt, and last is fear. Okay, the sixth sense will never function while these three negatives or any of them remain in your mind. The members of this unholy trio are closely related, where one is found, the other is two are close at hand. Indecision is the seedling of fear. Remember this. As you read, indecision crystallizes into doubts. The two blend and become fear. The blending process often is slow. This is one reason why these three enemies are so dangerous. They germinate and grow without their presence being observed. The remainder of this chapter describes an end which must be attained before the philosophy as a whole can be put into practical use. It also analyzes the condition which has but lately reduced huge numbers of people to poverty, and it states a truth which must be understood by all who accumulate riches, whether measured in terms of money or a state of mind of far greater value than money. The purpose of this chapter is to turn the spotlight of attention upon the cause and the cure of the six basic fears. Before we can master an enemy, we must know its name, its habits, and its place of abode. As you read, analyze yourself carefully and determine which, if any of the six common fears have attached themselves to you. Do not be deceived by the habits of these subtle enemies. Sometimes they remain hidden in the subconscious mind, where they are difficult to locate and still more difficult to eliminate. Okay, the six basic fears. There are six basic fears, with some combination of which every human suffers at one tune to or another. Most people are fortunate if they do not suffer from the entire six, named in the order of their most common appearance. They are the fear of poverty at the bottom of, the fear of criticism most of once, and the fear of ill health or is the fear of loss of love or someone, the fear of old age, fear of death. All other fears are of minor importance. They can be grouped under this six heading. The prevalence of these fears as a course to the world runs in cycles. The for almost 6 years, while the depression was on, we floundered in the cycle of fear of poverty. During the World War, we were in the cycle of fear of death. Just following the war, we are in the cycle of fear of ill health, as evidence by the epidemic of disease which spread itself all over the world. Fear are nothing more than states of mind. One's state of mind is subject to control and direction. Physicians, as everyone knows, are less subject to attack by disease than ordinary laymen, for the reason that physicians do not fear disease. Physicians without fear or agitation have been known to physically contact hundreds of people daily who are suffering from such contagious disease as smallpox without becoming infected. Their immunity against the disease consisted largely, if not solely, if the absolute lack of fear. Man can create nothing which he does not first conceive in the form of an impulse of thought. Following these statements comes another of still greater importance, namely, man's thought impulses begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent, whether those thoughts are voluntary or involuntary. Thought impulses which are picked up through the ether by mere chance, thoughts which have been released by other minds, may determine one's financial business, professional, or social destiny just as surely as do the thought impulses which one creates by intent and design. We are here laying the foundation of the presentation of the fact of great importance to the person who does not understand why some people appear to be lucky, while others of equal or greater ability, training, experience, and the brain capacity seem destined to ride with in misfortune. This fact may be explained by the statement that every human being has the ability to completely control his own mind, and with this control obviously every person may open his mind to the trump thought impulses which are being released by other brains, or close the doors tightly and admit only thought impulses of his own choice. Nature has endowed man with absolute control over but one thing, and that is thought. This fact, coupled with that additional fact that everything which man creates begins in the form of a thought, leads one very near to the principle by which fear may be mastered. If it is true that all thought has a tendency to clothe itself in its physical equivalent, and this is true beyond any reasonable room for doubt, it is equally true that thought impulses for fear and poverty cannot be translated into terms of courage and financial gain. The people of America began to think of poverty following the Wall Street crash of 1929. Slowly but surely, that mass thought was crystallized into its physical equivalent, which was known as a depression. This land to happen, it is unconformity with the laws of nature. Okay, next is fear of poverty. There can be no compromise between poverty and the riches. The two roads of that lead to poverty and riches travel in opposite direction. If you want to riches, you must refuse to accept any circumstances that leads towards poverty. The word riches is the year used in its broadest sense, meaning financial, spiritual, mental, and material state. The starting point of the path that leads to riches is desire. In chapter 1, you receive full instructions for proper use of desire. In this chapter on fear, you have complete instructions for the preparing your mind to make practical use of desire. Here, then, it is the place to give yourself a challenge which will definitely determine how much of this philosophy you have absorbed. Here is the point at which you can turn profit and foretell accurately what the future holds in story for you. If after reading this chapter you are willing to accept poverty, you may as well make up your mind to receive poverty. This is one decision you cannot avoid. If you demand riches, determine what form and how much will be required to satisfy you. You know the road that leads to riches. You have been given roadmap which, if followed, will keep you on that road. If you neglect to make the smart start or stop before you arrive, no one will be blamed but you. This responsibility is yours. No alibi will save you from accepting the responsibility if you now fail or refuse to demand riches of life, because the acceptance calls for but no one thing incidentally, the only thing you can control, and that is the state of mind. The state of mind is something that one assumes it cannot be purchased, it must be created. Fear of poverty is a state of mind, nothing else, but it is sufficient to destroy one's chances of achievement in any undertaking, a truth which became painfully evident during the Depression. This fear paralyzes the faculty of reason, destroys the faculty of imagination, kills of self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm, discourages initiative, leads to uncertainty of purpose, encourages procrastination, wipes out enthusiasm, and makes self-control an impossibility. It takes a charm from one's personality, destroys the possibility of accurate thinking, diverts concentration of effort. It masters persistence, turns the willpower into nothingness, destroys ambition, beclouds the memory, and invites failure in every conceivable form. It kills love and associates the finer emotions of the heart, discourages friendship, and invites disaster in 100 forms, leads to sleeplessness, misery, and unhappiness. And all this despite the obvious truth that we live in a world of overabundance of everything the heart could desire, with nothing standing between us and our desires, excepting lack of definite purpose. The fear of poverty is, without doubt, the most destructive of six basic fears. It has been placed at the head of the list because it is the most difficult to master. Considerable courage is required to state the truth about the origin of the fear, and still greater courage to accept the truth after it has been stated. The fear of poverty grew out of man's inherited tendency to prey upon his fellow man economically. Nearly all animals lower than men are motivated by instinct, but their capacity to think is limited. Therefore, they prey upon one another physically. Man, with his superior sense of intuition, with the capacity of think and to reason, does not eat his fellow man bodily. He gets more satisfaction out of eating him financially. Financially, a man is so avaricious that every conceivable law has been passed to safeguard him from his fellow men. Of all the ages of world of which we know anything, the age in which we live seems to be one that is outstanding because of man's money madness. A man is considered less than the dust of the earth unless he can display the fat bank account. But if if he has money, never mind how he acquired it, he is a king or a big shot. He is above the law. He rules in politics, he dominates in business, and the whole world about him bows in respect when he passes. Nothing brings men so much suffering and humility as the poverty. Only those who have experienced poverty understand the full meaning of this. It is no wonder that man fears poverty. Through a long line of inherited experience, man has learned for sure that some men cannot be trusted where matters of money and earthly possessions are concerned. This is a rather stinging indictment. The worst part of the being that is true. The majority of marriages are motivated by the wealth possessed by one or both of the contracting parties. It is no wonder, therefore, that the divorce courts are busy. So eager is a man to possess wealth that he will acquire it in whatever manner he can, through legal methods if possible, through other methods if necessary, or expedient. Self-analysis may disclose weaknesses which one does not like to acknowledge. This form of examination is essential to all who demand of life more than mediocrity and poverty. Remember as you check yourself point by point that you are both the court and the just jury, the prosecuting the attorney and the attorney for the defense, and that you are the plaintiff and the defendant, also that you are on trial. Face the facts squarely. Ask yourself definite questions and demand direct replies. When the examination is over, you will know more about yourself. If you do not feel that you can be an impartial judge in this self examination, call upon someone who knows he will to serve as judge. Will you cross examine yourself? You are after the truth. Get it no matter the art what cost, even though it may temporarily embarrasses you. The majority of people, if asked what they fear most, would reply, I fear nothing. The reply would be inaccurate because few people realize that they are bound, handicapped, whipped spiritually and physically through some form of fear. So, subtle and deeply seated is the emotion of fear that one may go through life burdened with it, never recognizing its presence. Only a courageous analysis will disclose the presence of this universal enemy. When you begin such an analysis, search deeply into your character. Here is a list of the symptoms for which you should look. Okay, what are the symptoms of the fear of poverty? Indifference, commonly expressed through lack of ambition, willingness to tolerate poverty, acceptance of whatever compensation life may offer without protest, mental and physical laziness, lack of initiative, imagination, intuition, and self-control. Second is indecision, the habit of permitting others to do one's thinking, staying on the fence. Next is doubt, generally expressed through alibis and excuses designed to cover up, explain away, or apologize for one's failures, sometimes expressed in the form of envy of those who are successfully or by criticizing them. Next is ori, usually expressed by finding fault with others, a tendency to spend beyond one's income, neglect of personal appearance, scolding and frowning, intemperance in the use of alcoholic drink, sometimes through the use of narcotics, nervousness, lack of voice, self-consciousness, and lack of self-reliance, overcatuation, the habit of looking for the negative side of every circumstances, thinking and talking of possible failure instead of concentrating upon the means of succeeding, knowing all the roads of disaster but never searching for the plans to avoid failure, waiting for a right time to begin putting ideas and plans into action until the waiting becomes a permanent habit. Remember those who have failed and forgetting those who have succeeded, seeing the hole in the doubt not top knot, but overlooking the top knot, pessimism leading to the indigestion, for elimination, auto intoxication, bad breath, and bad deposition. Next is procrastination, the habit of putting off until tomorrow that which should have been done last year, spending enough time in creating alibis and excuses to have done the job. This symptom is closely related to overcaution, doubt, and worry, refusal to accept responsibility when it can be avoided, willingness to compromise compromise rather than put off a stiff fight, compromising with difficulties instead of harnessing and using them as stepping stones to advancement, bargaining with life for a penny instead of demanding prosperity, impulse, riches, contentment, contentment, happiness, and planning planning what to do if and when overtaken by failure instead of burning all the bridges and making retreat impossible. Weakness of and often total lack of self-confidence, definiteness of purpose, self-control, initiative, enthusiasm, and ambitions thrift and sound reasoning ability, accepting poverty instead of demanding riches, association with those who accept poverty instead of seeking the company of those who demand and receive riches. And next is what money talks. Okay, some will ask, why did you write a book about money? Why measure riches in dollars alone? Some will believe that rightly so that there are other forms of riches more desirable than money. Yes, there are riches which cannot be measured in terms of dollars, but there are millions of people who will say, give me all the money I need and I will find everything else I want. The major reason why I wrote this book on how to get money is the fact that the world has but lately passed through an experience that left millions of men and women paralyzed with the fear of poverty. What this sort of fear does to the one was well described by Westbrook Pegler in New York World Telegram. Money is only calm cells of or metal discs or scraps of paper, and there are treasures of the heart and soul which money cannot buy. But most people, being broke and unable to keep this in mind and sustain their spirit, when a man is down and out and on the street, unable to get any job at all, sometimes happens to his spirit, which can be observed in the drop of his shoulders, the set of his heart, his work, and his gaze. He cannot escape a feeling of inferiority among people with regular employment, even though he knows they are definitely not his equals in character, intelligence, and ability. These people, even his friends, feel, on the other hand, a sense of superiority and regard him, perhaps unconsciously, as a casualty. He may borrow for a time, but not enough to carry on in his accustomed way, and he cannot continue to borrow very long. But borrowing in itself, when a man is borrowing merely to live, is a depressing experience, and the money lacks the power of earned money to revive his spirits. Of course, none of his this applies to born bombs or habituals never do well, but only to men or normal ambitions and self-respect. And next is what women conceal despair. When the talk is come to the women conceal despair, women in the same predicament must be different. We somehow do not think of women at all in considering the down and the outdoors. They are scarce in the breadliness. They rarely are seen begging on the streets, and they are not recognizable in crowds by the same plain signs which identify boasted men. Of course, I do not mean the suppling hands of the city streets who are opposite number of the confirmed male bombs. I mean reasonably young, decent, and intelligent women. There must be many of them, but their despair is not apparent. Maybe they kill themselves. When a man is down and out, he has time on his hands for the brooding, and he may travel miles to see a man about a job and discover that the job is filled or that is one of those jobs with no base pay but only a commission on the sale of some useless knick which nobody would buy except out of pity. Turning that down, he finds himself back on the street with nowhere to go but just anywhere. So he walks and walks. He gazes into windows at luxuries which are not for him and feels inferior and gives away to people who stop to look with an active interest. He wanders into the railroad station or puts himself down in the library to ease his legs and soak off a little heat. But that isn't a look for a job, so he gets going again. He may not know it, but his aimlessness would give him away, even if the very line very lines of his figure did not. He may be well dressed in the clothes left over from the days when he had a steady job, but the clothes cannot disguise the draw. And next is the money makes difference. How money makes difference? Okay, see, he sees thousands of other people, bookkeepers or clerks or chemists and wagon hands busy at their work and envies them from the bottom of his soul. They have their independence, their self-respect and manhood, and he simply cannot convince himself that he is a good man. Too tough he argue it out and arrive at a favorable verdict hour after hour. It is a just money which makes this difference in him. With a little money he would be himself again. Some employers take the most shocking advantage of people who are down and out. The agencies hang out little colored cards offering miserable wages to boasted men. $12 a week and $15 a week and $18 a week job is a flom, and anyone with $25 a week with a offer does not hang the job in front of agency on a colored card. I have a want ad clipped from a local paper demanding a clerk, a good clean penman, to take telephone orders for a sandwich shop from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. for $8 a month, not $8 a week, but $8 a month. The R says also state religion. Can you imagine the brutal effrontery of anyone who demands a good clean penman for 11 cents an hour, inquiring into the victim's religion? But that is what busted people are up for. Okay, next is the fear of criticism. Okay, people what they think and what people think about them, like this, the fear of criticism. The fear of criticism is almost people 80% of people have in their mind. So let's start. Just how many originally came by this fear, no one can state definitely, but one thing is certain: he has it in a highly developed form. Some believe that this fear made its appearance about the time that politics became a profession. Others believe it can be traced through the age when women first began to concern themselves with styles in wearing apparel. This author, being neither a humorist nor a prophet, inclined to attribute this the basic fear of criticism to that part of man's inherited nature which prompts him not only to take away his fellow man's goods and wares, but to justify his action by criticism of his fellow man's character. It is a well known fact that a thief will criticize a man from whom he steals, that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, but by attempting to besmirch their opponents. The fear of criticism takes on many forms of majority of which are petty and tribal. Bald-headed men, for example, are bald for no other reason than their fear of criticism. Hairs become bald because of the tight-fitting bands of hairs which cut off the circulation from the roots of the hair. Men wear hairs not because they actually need them, but mainly because everyone is doing it. The individual fails into the line and does like list some other individual criticize him. Women seldom have bald hairs or even thin hair because they wear hairs which fit their hairs loosely on the purpose on the only purpose of the hairs being under adornment. But it must not be supposed that women are free from the fear of criticism. If any woman claims to be superior to men with reference to this fear, ask her to walk down the street wearing a hat of the vintage of 1890. The manufacturer of clothing have not been slow to capitalize this basic fear of criticism with which all mankind has been caused. Every season that styles in many articles of wearing apparel change who establishes the styles. Certainly not the purchaser of clothing, but the manufacturer. Why does he change the styles so often? The answer is obvious. He changes the styles so he can sell more clothes. For the same reason, manufacturers of automobiles, with a few rare and very sensible exceptions, change styles of models every season. No man wants to drive an automobile which is not of that least style, although the older model may actually be the better car. We have been describing the manner in which people behave under the influence of fear of criticism as applied to the small and petty things of life. Let us now examine human behavior when this fear affects people in connection with the more important events of human relationship. Take for example practically any person who has reached the age of mental maturity from 35 to 40 years of age has as a general average. If you could read secret thoughts of his mind, you would find a very decided disbelief in most of the fables taught by majority of the dogmatists and theologians a few decades back. Not often, however, will you find a person who has the courage to openly state his belief on this subject. Most people will, if pressed far enough, tell a lie rather than admit that they do not believe the stories associated with that form of religion which held people in bondage prior to age of scientific discovery and education. Why does the average person, even in this day, is enlightenment, say away from denying his belief in the fables which were the basis of the most of the religions a few decades ago? The answer is because of the fear of criticism. Men and women have been born at the stake of far daring to express misbelief in ghosts. It is no wonder we have inherited a consciousness which makes us fear criticism. The time was and not far in the past when criticism carried severe punishments. It still does in some countries. The fear of criticism robs man of his initiative, destroys his power of imagination, limits his individuality, takes away his self-reliance, and does him a damage of a hundred other ways. Parents often do their children irreparable injury by criticism them. The mother of one of my boyhood chums comes used to furnish him with a switch almost daily, always completing the job will with the statement, "You will land in the penitentiary before you are 20." He was sent to the reformatory at the age of 17. Criticism is the one form of service of which everyone has too much. Everyone has a stock of wheat which is handed out gratis, whether called for or not. One's nearest relatives often are the worst offenders. It should be recognized as a crime. In reality, it is a crime of the worst natures for any parent to build inferiority complexes in the mind of a child through unnecessary criticism. Employer who understand human nature get the best there is in men, not by criticism, but by constructive suggestion. Parents may accomplish the same results with their children. Criticism will plant fear in the human heart or resentment, but in will, not will, love, or affection. Next is, what are the symptoms of the fear of criticism? First is, this fear is almost universal as the fear of poverty, and its effects are just as fatal to personal achievement, mainly because this fear destroys initiative and discourages the use of imagination. Okay, there is a major symptoms of the fear are, first is self-consciousness, generally expressed through nervousness, timidity in conversation and meeting strangers, awkward moving of the hands and limbs, shifting of eyes. And next is lack of poise, expressed through lack of voice control, nervousness in the presence of others, poor posture of body, poor memory. Okay, this is the lack of poise. And next is personality, lacking in firmness of decision, personal charm, and ability to express opinions. Definitely, the habit of sidestepping issues instead of meeting them squarely, agreeing with others without careful examination of their opinions. Inferiority complex. Next, the habit of expressing self-approval by word of mouth and actions as a means of covering of a feeling of inferiority, using big words to impress others, often without knowing the real meaning of the words, l- limiting others in dress, speech, and manners, boasting and imaginary achievements. This sometimes gives a surface appearance of a feeling of superiority, extra extravagance, the habit of trying to keep up with the Jonas, spending beyond one's income. And next is lack of initiative, failure to embrace opportunities for self-advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in one's own ideas, giving evasive answers to questions asked by superiors, hesitancy of manner and speech, deceit in both words and deeds. Next is lack of ambition, mental and physical laziness, lack of assertion, slowness in reaching decision, easily influenced by others, the habit of criticizing others behind their luck and flattering them to their faces, the habit of accepting defeat without protest, quitting an undertaking when opposed by others suspicious of other people without cause, lacking in tactfulness of manner and speech, unwillingness to accept the blame for mistakes. And next is fear of ill health. This fear may be traced to both physical and social heredity. It is closely associated as to its origin with the causes of fear of old age and the fear of death, because it leads one closely to the border of terrible worlds of which man knows not, but concerning which he has been taught some discomforting stories. The opinion is somewhat general also that certain unethical people engaged in the business of selling health have had not a little to do with keeping alive the fear of ill health. In the main, a man fears ill health because of the terrible pictures which have been planted in his mind of what may happen if death should overtake him. He also fears it because of the economic toll which it may claim. A reputable physician estimated that 75% of all people who visit physicians for professional service are suffering with chondria, imaginary illness. It has been shown most convincingly that the fear of disease, even where there is not the slightest cause for fear, often produces the physical symptoms of the disease feared. And powerful and mighty is the human mind. It builds boils or it destroys, playing upon this common weakness of fear of ill health. Dispensers of patent medicines have reaped fortunes. This form of imposition upon credulous humanity becomes so prevalent. Some 20 years ago, the Calirius Weekly magazine conducted a bitter campaign against some of the worst offenders in the patent medicine business. During the flu epidemic, which broke out during the World War, the mayor of New York City took drastic steps to check the damage which people were doing themselves through their inherent fear of ill health. He called in the newspaper men and said to them, "Gentlemen, I feel it necessary to ask you not to publish any scare headlines concerning the flu epidemic unless you cooperate with me. We will have a situation which we cannot control. The newspapers quite publishing stories about the flu. Within 1 month, the epidemic had been successfully checked through a series of experiments conducted some years ago. It was proved that people may be made ill by suggestion. We conducted this experiment by causing three acquaintances to visit the victims, each of whom asked the questions, "What ails you? You look terribly ill." The first questioner usually provoked a grin and nonchalant, "Oh, nothing, I am all right," from the victim. The second questioner usually was answered with the statement, "I don't know exactly, but I do feel badly." The third questioner was usually met with the frank admission that the victim was actually feeling ill. Try this on an acquaintance if you doubt that it will make him uncomfortable, but do not carry the experience too far. There is a certain religious sect whose members take vengeance upon their enemies by hexing method. They call it flashing a spell on the victim. There is a overwhelming evidence that disease sometimes begins in the form of negative thought impulse. Such an impulse may be passed from one mind to another by suggestion or created by an individual in own mind, and man who was blessed with more wisdom than this incident might indicate once said, "When anyone asks me how I feel, I always want to answer by knocking him down." Okay, doctors and patients new climates for their health because a change of mental attitude is necessary. The seed of fear of ill health lives in every human mind, or if your discouragement, disappointment in love and business affairs cause this seed to germinate and grow. The recent business depression kept the doctors on the run because every form of negative thinking may cause ill health. Disappointments in business and in love stand at the head of the list of causes of fear and of ill health. A young man suffered a disappointment in love which sent him at the hospital for months. He hovered between life and death. A specialist in suggestive therapeutic was called in. The specialist changed nurses, placing him in charge of very charming young woman who began by a free arrangement with the doctor to make love to him the first day of her arrival on job. Within 3 weeks, the patient was discharged from the hospital, still suffering but with an entirely different malady. He was in love again. The remedy was wax, but the patient and the nurse were later married. Both are in good health at the time of this writing. And next is symptoms of the fear of ill health. Okay, what are the symptoms? The symptoms of this almost universal fear are autosuggestion, the habit of negative use of self-suggestion by looking for and accepting to find the symptoms of all kinds of disease, enjoying imaginary illness and speaking of it as being real, the habit of trying all fads and isms recommended by others as having therapeutic value, talking to others of operations, accidents, and other forms of illness, experimenting with these diets, physical exercise, reducing systems without professional guidance, trying home remedies, patent medicines, and quack remedies, hypochondria, the habit of talking of illness, concentrating the mind upon disease, the end expecting its appearance until the nervous break occurs. Nothing that comes in bottles can cure this condition. It is brought on by negative thinking, and nothing but positive thought can affect a cure. Hypochondria, a medical term for imaginary disease, is said to do as much damage on occasion as the disease one fears might do. Most so-called cases of nerves came from imaginary illness. And next is exercise. Fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight by causing one to avoid outdoor life. Next is susceptibility. Fear of ill health breaks down nature's body resistance and creates a favorable condition for any form of disease. One may contact the fear of ill health of pain is related to the fear of poverty, especially in the case of hypochondriac who constantly worries about the possibility of having to pay doctor's bills, hospital bills, etc. This is the type of person spends most time preparing for sickness, talking about death, saving money for cemetery lots and burial expenses, etc. Next is self coddling, that the habit of making the bid for sympathy using imaginary illness as the lure. People often resort to this trick to avoid work. The habit of feigning illness to cover plain laziness or to serve as an alibi for lack of ambition. Intemperance, the habit of using alcohol or narcotics to destroy pains such as headaches, neuralgia, etc. Instead of eliminating the cause, the habit of reading about illness and worrying about the possibility of being stricken by it, the habit of reading patent medicine advertisements. Okay, this is the symptoms are of the fear of ill health. Next is, what is fear of loss of love? Okay, the original source of this inherent fear needs but little description because it obviously grew out of man's polygamous habit of stealing his fellow man's mate and his habit of taking liberties with her whenever he could. Jealousy and other similar forms of dementia, paradox grow out of man's inherited fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is most painful of the all six basic fears, impossibly plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears, as it often leads to permanent insanity. The fear of loss of love probably dates back to the Stone Age, when men stole women by brute force. They continue to steal females, but their technique has changed. Instead of force, they now use persuasion, the promise of pretty clothes, motor cars, and other weight, much more effective than physical force. Men's habits are the same as they were at the dawn of civilization, but he expresses them differently. Careful analysis has shown that women are more susceptible to this fear than men. This fact is easily explained. Women have learned from experience that men are polygamous by nature, that they are not be trusted in the hands of rivals. And what are the symptoms of the fear of loss of love? The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are jealousy, the habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones without any reasonable evidence of sufficient grounds. Jealousy is a form of dementia paracox, which sometimes becomes viol- violent without the slightest cause. The habit of causing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds, general suspicion of everyone, absolute faith in no one, fault finding, the habit of finding fault with friends, relatives, business associates, and loved ones upon the slightest provocation without any cause whatsoever. Next is gambling. The habit of gambling, stealing, cheating, and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones with the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond one's means or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones with the object of making a favorable showing. Insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of self-control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. And next is the fear of old age. In the main, this fear grows out of two sources. First, the thought that all else may bring with the poverty. Secondly, and the far the most common source of origin from false and cruel teaching of the past, which have been too well mixed with fire and brimstones and other baggage cunningly designed to enslave men through fear. In the basic fear of old age, man has to very sound a reason for his apprehension. One growing out of his distrust of his fellow man, who may seize whatsoever worldly goods he may possess, and other arising from the terrible pictures of the world beyond, which were planted in his mind through social heredity before he came into full possession of his mind. The possibility of ill health, which is more common as people grow older, is also a contributing cause of this common fear of old age. Erotism also enters into the cause of fear of old age, as no man cherishes the thought of diminished sex attraction. The most common cause of fear of old age is associated with the possibility of poverty. For house is not a pretty word. It throws a chill into the mind of every person who faces the possibility of having to spend his declining years on a poor farm. Another contributing cause of the fear of old age is the possibility of loss of freedom and independence. The old age may bring with the loss of both physical and economic freedom. And next is, what are the symptoms of the fear of old age? The commonest symptoms of this fear are the tendency to slow down and develop an inferiority complex at the age of mental maturity. Around the age of 40, falsely believing oneself to be sleeping because of age. The truth is, man's most useful years, mentally and spiritually, are those between 40 to 60. The habit of speaking apologetically of oneself as being old merely because one has reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached at the age of wisdom and understanding. The habit of killing if of initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing oneself too old to exercise these qualities. The habit of men or women of 40 dressing with that aim of trying to appear much younger and affecting mannerism of youth, thereby inspiring ridicule by both friends and strangers. And next is the fear of death. To sum this, is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is the obvious, the terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged directly to religious pantheism, so called heathen, are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years, man has been asking still answered questions, whence and whether. Where did I come from and where I am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the most cunning and safety were not slow to offer the answer to these questions. For a price witness now the major sources of origin of the fear of death. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, and accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight away into heaven. When you die, Christ, a leader of sectarianism, remain out of tent, my tent, says the leader, and may the devil take you and burn you throughout eternity. Eternity. Eternity is a long time, fire a terrible thing. The thought of eternal punishment with fire not only causes man to fear death, it often causes him to lose his reason. It destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. During my research, I reviewed a book entitled A Catalogue of Gods, in which were listed the 30,000 gods which man has worshipped. Think of it, 30,000 of them represented by everything from the crayfish to men. It is little wonder that men have become frightened at the approach of death. While the religious leader may not be able to provide safe conduct into heaven, nor by lack of such provision, allow the unfortunate to descend into hell. The possibility of the latter seems so terrible that the very thought of the lays hold of imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. In truth, no man knows, and no man has ever known what heaven or hell is like, or nor does any man know. If either place actually exists, this very lack of positive knowledge opens the doors of human mind to the charlatan, so he may enter and control that mind with his stock of legendary men and various brands of fears, fraud, and trickery. The fear of death is not a common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. Men of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from this terrible fear of death. The young men and young women who attend the college and universities are not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through the aid of biology, astronomy, geology, and other related sciences, the fear of the dark ages which gripped the minds of men and destroyed the region have been dispelled. Insane asylums are filled with men and women who have gone mad because of the fear of death. This fear is useless. Death will come no matter what anyone may think about it. Accept it as a necessity and pass that thought out of the out of your mind. It must be a necessity, or it would not become to all. Perhaps it is not a bad as it has been pictured. The entire world is made of only two things, energy and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter or nor energy, only two realities known to man, can be created nor be destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy. If it is anything, if neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course, life cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. That is mere transition. If death is not mere change or transition, then nothing comes after that except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep, and a sleep is nothing to be feared. Thus, you may wipe out forever the fear of death. And next is, what are the symptoms of the fear of death? The general symptoms of this fear are the habit of thinking about dying instead of making the most of life, due generally to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has time to think about dying. He finds life too thrilling to worry about death. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where one's death would leave loved ones poverty stricken. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the consequent breaking down of physical body resistance. And the commonest cause of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment, overlove, insanity, religious fanaticism, fun, fanaticism, fanaticism. Okay, next is old man Ori. Ori is a state of mind based upon fear. It works slowly but persistently. It is insidious and subtle. Step by step, it digs itself in until it paralyzes one's reasoning faculty, destroys self confidence and initiative. Ori is a form of sustained fear caused by indecision. Therefore, it is a state of mind which can be controlled, and an unsettled mind is helpless. Indecision makes an unsettled mind. Most individuals lack of willpower to reach decisions promptly and to stand by them after they have been made, even during normal business conditions. During periods of economic unrest, such as the world recently experienced, the individual is handicapped not alone by his inherent nature to the slow at reaching decisions, but he is influenced by the indecision of others around him who have created a state of mass indecision. During the depression of whole atmosphere all over the world was filled with fiorenza and the worst the two mental disease germs which began to spread themselves after the Wall Street frenzy in 1929. There is only one known antidote for these germs. It is the habit of prompt and free firm decision. Moreover, it is an antidote which every individual must apply for himself. We do not worry over conditions only once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action. I once interviewed a man who was to be electrocuted. 2 hours later, the condemned man was calmest of some 8 men who were in the death cell with him. His calmness prompted him to ask him how it felt to know that he was going into eternity. In a short while, with a smile of confidence of his face, he said, "It feels fine. Just think, brother, my troubles will soon be over. I have had nothing but trouble all my life. It has been hardship to get food and clothing. Soon I will not need these things. I have felt fine ever since I learned for certain that I must die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in the spirit, good spirit." As he speak, he devoured a dinner of proportion sufficient for 3 men, eating every mouthful of food brought to him, and apparently enjoying it as much as if no disaster awaited him. Next, his decision gave this man resign resignation to his fate. Decision can also prevent one's acceptance of undesired circumstances. The six basic fears become translated into a state of worry through indecision. Relieve yourself forever of fear of death by reaching a decision to accept death as the inescapable event. With the fear of poverty by reaching a decision to get along whatever wealth you can accumulate without worry. Put your foot upon the neck of the fear of criticism by reaching a decision not to worry about what other people think, do, or say. Eliminate the fear of old age by reaching a decision to accept it not as the handicapped but as a great blessing which carries with the wisdom, self control, and understanding not known to youth. Acquaint yourself to of the fear of the ill and health by the decision to forget symptoms. Master of the fear of loss, love by reaching decision to get along without love, if that is necessary. Kill the habit of worry. It is in all its forms by reaching a general blanket decision that nothing with which life has a suffer is worth the price of worry. With this decision will come forth peace of mind and calmness of thought, which will bring happiness. A man whose mind is filled with fear not only destroys his own chances of intelligent action, but he transmits these destructive vibrations to the minds of all who come into contact with him and destroy also these chances. Even a dog or a horse knows when its master lacks courage. Moreover, a dog or a horse will pick off the vibration of fear thrown off by its master and behave accordingly. Lower down the line of intelligence in the animal kingdom, one finds this same capacity to pick off the vibration of fear. A honey bee immediately senses fear in the mind of a person for reasons unknown. A bee will sting the person whose mind is releasing vibrations of fear much more readily than it will molest the person whose mind registers no fear. The vibrations of fear pass from one mind to another just as quickly and as surely as the sound of the human voice passes from the broadcasting station to the receiving set of radio, and by the self same medium. Mental telepathy is a reality. Thoughts pass from one mind to another voluntarily, whether or not this fact is recognized by either the person releasing the thought or the person who picks up those thoughts. The person who gives expression by words of mouth to negative or destructive thoughts is practically certain to experience the results of those words in the form of destructive kickback. The release of destructive thought impulses alone without the aid of words produces also a kickback in more ways more than one. First of all, the perhaps the most important to be remembered, the person who releases thoughts of a destructive nature must suffer damage through the breaking down of the faculty of creative imagination. Secondly, the presence in the mind of any destructive emotion develops a negative personality which repels people and often converts them into antagonist. The third source of damage to the person who entertains or releases negative thoughts lies in this significant fact. These thoughts impulses are not only damaging to others, but they embed themselves in the subconscious mind of the person releasing them, and they become a part of his character. One is never through with a thought merely by releasing it. When a thought is released, a spread in every direction through the medium of by the ether, but it also plants itself permanently in the subconscious mind of the person releasing it. Your business in the life is presumably to achieve success. To be successful, you must find peace of mind, acquire the material needs of life, and above all, attain happiness. All of these evidence of the success begin in the form of thought impulses. You may control your own thought mind. You have the power to feed it whatever thought impulses you choose. With this privilege goes also the responsibility of using this it constructively. You are the master of your own reality, destiny, just as surely as you have the power of control your own thoughts. You may influence, direct, and eventually control your own environment, making your life what you want it to be, or you may neglect to exercise the privilege which is yours to make your life to order, thus casting yourself upon the broad sea of circumstances where you will be tossed inter, and yawn like a ship on the waves of the ocean. Next is the devil's worship, the seventh basic evil. In addition to six basic fears, there is another evil by which people suffer. It constitutes a rich soil in which the seeds of failure grow abundantly. It is the so subtle that its presence of often is not detected. This affliction cannot properly be classed as a fear. It is more deeply seated and more often fatal than all of the six pures. For want a better name, let us call this label susceptibility to a negative influence. Men who accumulate great riches always protect themselves against this evil. The poverty stricken never do. Those who succeed in any calling must prepare their minds to resist the evil. If you are reading this philosophy for the purpose of accumulating riches, you should examine yourself very carefully to determine whether you are susceptible to negative influence. If you neglect this self-analysis, you will forfeit your right to attain the object of your desires. Make the analysis searching. After you read the questions prepared for this self-analysis, hold yourself to a strict accountant in your answers. Go at the task as carefully as you would search for any other enemy you knew to be awaiting you in ambush, and deal with your own faults as you would with a more tangible enemy. You can easily protect yourself against highway robbers because the law provides organized cooperation for your benefits. But the seventh basic evil is more difficult to master because it strikes when you are not aware of its presence. When you are asleep and while you are awake. Moreover, its weapon is intangible because it consists of merely a state of mind. This evil is also dangerous because it strikes in all it adds many different forms of there are human experience. Sometimes it enters the mind through the well-meant words of one's own relatives. At other times, it bores from within through one's own mental attitude. Although it is as deadly as poison, even though it may not kill as quickly. And next is how to protect yourself against negative influences. To protect yourself against negative influences, whether of your own making or the result of activities of negative people around you, recognize that you have a willpower and put it into constant use until it builds a wall of immunity against negative influences in your own mind. Recognize the fact that you and every other human being are by nature lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to all suggestions which harmonize with your weaknesses. Recognize that you are by nature susceptible to all six basic fears and set of habits for the purpose of counteracting all these fears. Recognize all the negative influences often work on you through your subconscious mind. Therefore, they are difficult to detect and keep in your mind closed against all people who depress or discourage you in any way. Clean out your medicine chest, throw away all pill bottles, and stop pandering to colds, anxious, pains, and imaginary illness. Deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act for yourself. Do not expect troubles as you they have tendency not to disappointment. Okay, without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open, the negative influence of other people. This weakness is all the other damaging because most people do not recognize that they are caused by it, and many who acknowledge it neglect or refuse to correct the evil until it becomes an uncontrollable part of their daily habits. To aid those who wish to see themselves as they really are, the following list of questions has been prepared. Read the questions and state of answer aloud so you can hear your own voice, and this will make easier for you to truthful and yourself. And next is 57 famous alibis by old men Eve. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievements. Some of these alibis are clever and a few of them are justifiable by the facts, but alibis cannot be used for money. The world wants to know only the one thing: have you achieved success? The character analyst compiled a list of most commonly used alibis. As you read the list up, examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis, if any, are your own property. Remember too, the philosophy presented in this book makes every one of these alibis absolute. If I did not have a wife and family, if I had enough food, if I had money, if I had a good education, if I had a get a job, if I had good health, if I only had time, if times were better, if other people understand me, if conditions around me were only different, if I could live my life over again, if I did not fear what they would say, if I had been given a chance, if I now had a chance, if other people did not have been it in for me, if nothing happens to stop me, if I were only younger, if I could only do what I want, if I had been born rich, if I could meet rich right people, if I had the talent that some people have, if I dared assert myself, if I only had embraced fast opportunities, if people did not get on my nerves, if I did not have to keep house and look after the children, if I could have saved some money, if I the boss only appreciated me, if I only had somebody to help me, if my family understand me, if I lived in a big city, if I could just get started, if I were only free, if I had personality of some people, if I were not so fat, if my talents were known, if I could just get a break, if I could only get out of debt, if I hadn't failed, if I only knew how, if everybody did not oppose me, if I don't have so many worries, if I could marry the right person, if the person people weren't so dumb, if my family were not so extravagant, if I were sure of myself, if I luck were not against me, if I had not been born under the wrong star, if it were not true that what is to be will be, if I did not have to work so hard, if I hadn't lost my money, if I lived in a different neighborhood, if I did not have a past, if I only had a business of my own, if other people would only listen to me, if, and this is the greatest of men them all, if I had the courage to see myself as I really I am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. Then I might have a chance to profit by my mistakes and learn something from the experience of others. For I know that there is something wrong with me, or I would now be where I would have been if I had spent more time analyzing my weakness and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis with which to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. The main alibi is the child of his own imagination. It is the human nature to defend one's own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for sometimes something we do. Pluto this truth is mine when he said, "The first and the best victory is conquer self." To be conquered by self is all the things most shameful and villain. Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature. It has always been a mystery to me," said Elwood Hubbard, "why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis or cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness, then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. Is you agitate before moving or neglect to prompt you may be whipped off the board of time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Precisely, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forcefully lied to come through with whatever you asked, but that alibi is not obsolete because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's bountiful riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating it on your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of the key, but there is a price you must pay. It do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportion. If you put the key to use, it is a satisfaction that comes to all who conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? If we all are related, said the immortal emotion, we shall meet. In closing, may I borrow his thought and say, if we are related, we have through these pages met. Okay, this is all about in chapter, but I leave the portion of the self-analysis questions. Okay, I will make the another video to be uh, discuss of the self-analysis test questions. Okay, see you next video. Thank you being with me. Okay, thank you, see you. Okay, thank you. See out another video, another book, or a new chapter, or a new vibe.